Hi all, Randi here out in nature. You probably hear the bird behind me, but I'll stand still. I'm on a gravel path, so that will probably make too much noise. I've been listening to Jacques Vallée and some of his video material. I have gathered the interviews with him I found to be most conducive for what I want to convey here in the future humanities, and it's on a playlist I now call the future sciences, where I'm now finding the ones that are carving the path for a different type of science. And of course, once I began that, then new things popped up. It's like being on a complete new timeline, which I think I am. It's interesting. Some of it is said to have been posted 4 years ago, and I know I looked up for not these names though, but I was looking up, and it's the energy just completely does not match 4 years ago what was going on there. Anyway, so this is how it's done. Doesn't matter. We know we're living in an interactive reality, so it depends on what they want us to see and what they want us to understand. There are also other lectures that I recommend you look into, because if you want disclosure, these are the ones that will give the disclosure. I always knew it was coming from science and not from some kind of elected, venerated, worshipped personality in the Oval Office, because that's what's going on over there. Sorry about that, but that is what you're doing. You're worshipping your president like a god, starstruck and what have you. So that's not where that would come from. And there's no need. Sorry for being a little bit harsh here, but there's no need for that, because what are we to do with disclosure? As Jacques Vallée say, what is disclosure? How many different forms? Or was it perhaps Paul H. Smith that I also got? He's a major of he was part of remote viewing programs of DoD, and that was later in 1996 was taken over by CIA and shut down. But he's now coming forth with a lot of information, and it's good information. He's got a PhD as well, so we're talking with scientists that are in the know. And this is, I'm finding more and more, there's also from Rice University. And there are different groups. I'm literally now finding all of these different types of scientists that are embarking on working with what they have been prohibited from working with for years, and are now being allowed to come forth with this, or are daring to come forth with it, because it's now become legit with the showing of the Tic Tac. And as I always said, that was the point of it. It was not to show public, because we have known for years, but it was to give the allowance for science to begin to work with this as a science. And I always said this will happen. That I said back then in the old, I removed them, but because they are just stating the obvious, that of course whenever we get this, it's a matter of seeding in new levels that allows for other forms of information to come forth, so that we can move into the futures where we can actually change the future as we're supposed to. Jacques Vallée is interesting because he's a mathematician. He also got a degree in physics, so he knows a little bit of this and that, and he has got some interesting perspectives on gravity as well as on physics as I have as well. And he is stating that relativity and what have you will not give us the explanations that we need, that instead it will be within the science of information systems, as I say as well. So clearly he has also been working on that level. I've got two people passing me here now. So that will be a little bit of a chatter in the background. So with that understanding as well, we are also having that notion that, as he explains in the first TED talk I have uploaded or shared, is that he talks about how these information systems will be the future sciences, which I completely agree on. And he had an encounter with a UFO as a young kid. He's actually the role model or the figure that was part of, the movie Encounter of a Fourth Kind by Spielberg. You remember the French scientist? He's the one that, because Spielberg met Jacques Vallée, and he is the one that is creating that figure in the Encounter of a Fourth Kind. Interesting enough, Jacques has also Valet has also made a paper where he goes in and say we have different forms of encounters. This is all available on his website under the research, where he talks about these different crafts that are wow, that was disgusting. A person just ran by. That was really nasty. Talking about these 2 seconds. Okay, talking about these yeah, you would ask me, Randi, why don't you do that at home? Because at home other things are going on. This is okay, you'll have to hear the gravel. I'm sorry about that, people. You just have to endure it, because clearly when I'm standing still, things are gathering around me, and that's not conducive for this talk. Yes, slight annoyance there. Okay, so what he says is this understanding of the science of systems, and he talks about these. He had a UFO encounter, and that led him into a different kind of trajectory, trying to find the answers for this, because that's what happens when we have the UFO encounters. We go in, and that tailors our lives. Similarly, as I was looking up in the sky when I was 13, and I just got this strong insight, we're not alone. So what does that mean? So we get these insights from a very young age, at adolescence typically, where we get either sights or information that then leads us into a completely different trajectory than the rest of the human population that does not have these encounters. So what he had in that paper you find on his website, I'll put link below, where he talks about these different types of crafts that are leaving residuals. And he was talking about the different encounters with these crafts, where he says that encounter fourth kind is actually where you get hurt. The encounter fifth kind is where you die. That's a little bit different than someone else we know that are also doing this in encounter analogy, Stephen Greer. So I just find that a little bit hilarious. It's Hayek that came up with these definitions of encounters, right? So what is in that paper is this understanding of one of the things that the UFO community has talked a lot about is this anti-grav technology. And since Jacques Vallée do not believe in gravity, which I don't either, got that information years ago, it doesn't exist. That's kind of science trying to grapple something they don't know, and he talks about that in that TED talk. That's why I brought it there, so you kind of get, okay, there are others onto this. Because we get that's not what it is. It's not technology we know of. And Jacques Vallée has been trying to investigate that and figure out, okay, what is it? What kind of technology we're then here talking about, right? What is it then? And he's been working with a guy from Stanford called Gary Nolan. I will find interviews with him as well, because he's coming forth with some of these understandings that he have got from his work with looking into some of these residual material from crafts that have landed. They have worked specifically with a material that has come from a Brazilian craft that allegedly fell or exploded, more accurately, exploded in the air in 1934. It is said it was 1957. We'll leave that one for open now, but he said this craft will be exploded in the air. And that's one of the interviews I brought on the playlist, but I'll put a link so you can hear him talk about that himself. And they have used these residuals, analyzed it, the exotic matter. They are of the same elements as we have on our planet, except that is ionized in a different way. It's ions, that means that they have their neutron, they have an extra neutron, and that neutron is a different composition, which goes with, as far as I can see now, I need to study it further. As far as I can see, that matches my claim that these groups, they are working through the quantum field and into our reality via the neutrons, not protons, not electrons. Because the electrons are tied to the magnetic field and the protons are tied to the sun. No science to verify that yet. This is a claim I'm making. So why am I looking into that? Because I'm looking into other that are saying more or less the same, so we can begin to build a pattern of science where we can say, okay, we are joining our concepts and understandings so that it becomes something that we Whether or not we are aware of each other, that's not needed. But our thought forms can connect. And that's why Paul H. Smith and his remote viewing becomes important, because he comes up with some very important concepts as well that are, when you do remote viewing, and I completely agree, and that's why I put him there, because that's my claim too. There's so much distortion in it, and people have preconceptions of what they want to see, and by that they completely distort what they are remote viewing, because they have all of this, and then it comes in with a lot of fantasy. So he says that only 10%, and this is Paul H. Smith that says only 10% of what is being remote viewed is actually accurate. The rest is just like the dirty water, the child and the baby in the bathwater. It's just the muddy water that most people, they're not trained to look through their own preconceptions and fantasies. So, and I agree on that one. The other one he says is, he calls it telepathic overlay. They have discovered that if more are working on the same idea, they might tap into each other's ideas, and by that are seeing the same thing. And that's what I'm talking about. This means that we can, non-local awareness as he calls it, I agree on that one. He also talks about, we don't know what consciousness is, we don't know what awareness is, we don't know what non-locality is, but that's what we call it. So we're talking about some really smart people here that are using, me, I'm going for the scientist in this, because that's an information I got years ago, that when I work with this, it should come from scientists, and that's why I've been waiting for so long for these to pop up and come with information, so we can build that pattern and put it together. And I will then correct what I know, add in into the collective field we're generating, and by that hopefully come up with some pretty good ideas that will lead to the sciences of the future that we need, including begin to loading into these patterns the holographic perspective of things, and working with the other dimensions as well. And Jacques Vallée also mentions that it's no big surprise how these crafts can manifest in our reality if they're walking from a different dimension into this da. Yes, we know that. Okay, so point being with these residuals, one of the things he worked with or talk about there is in that paper too, some crafts that were heavy craft, perhaps 20 tons or something, leaving huge marks in the ground. How can a craft that weighs so much lift up and navigate in the sky, in the air, in maneuvers that defies all sciences? I have put in as well a talk from Rice University. I forgot her name now. It's there. She is a reporter, a journalist from The Guardian that has been working with UFOs for over 20 years. She has now thrown her love on life after death and have been working with mediumship and sciences. And she has found this guy in Britain, and that podcast or that lecture video is there too, where she explains it herself. You can look at that, where she talks about how in the sciences that these otherworldly humans, because they are humans, can manifest into this reality, and they can change matter, they can make things go through things, they can literally things that shouldn't be able to permeate each other, they make it permeate each other. So this is again telling us reality is not real. And if we go on to that idea that matter is not matter, and things can be changed, and things are tangible but also permeable, which quantum science tells us that it can both be particles and waves. And if we stop having that ridiculous idea that's only on the micro level and begin to work with the concepts, and Jacques Vallée says as well, we're just dividing it into more and more atoms, and then we explain that with that, creating more and more ideas that doesn't really explain anything. So that's part of why I wanted to bring here as well. But that is the understanding of spheres within spheres, realities within realities, and how they affect each other. So that's where the science of information system comes in. You heard me talk about information systems for a long time, that we need to work with the systemic energetic awareness, that we need to learn to understand systems, and we need to learn to understand systems as systems of information. And once we get that, and then add in the probability and the possibilities and other dimensions, and that reality as we know of it both can be waves and particles on a macro level too, then we begin to understand why some of them cluster into particles and why some of them remain as wave patterns, because we're seeing it in reality. We got sun that has quote unquote light that has no gravity, because it's waves, and then we have gravity within matter. But if we remove the gravity and get rid of that one and begin to work with the magnetic field and work with that as a different wave pattern that are tailoring the electrons to move in a specific direction and becoming virtual, popping in and out reality, well, then things begin to make much more sense. So that's kind of where we are on that one for now. So that's what I wanted to put in here. So the question is, again, how can something that's extremely heavy levitate when it's extremely heavy? And that's a little piece of information that kind of sparked me to do this longer talk here, is that it's kind of, if you look at a bird or if you look at an insect, they're very light so they can float. The closer you get to the ground, the more dense you have to be. Like humans, we're more heavy. So that means to stay on the planet, quote unquote, you have to be heavy, right? We're talking about that when, if it's true or not, with the moon landings, they had heavy shoes to tires to the ground. So of course, these craft that are ionized, that are working with a different type of what we call elements that are tied together chemically differently with different types of chemical bonds, well, of course, they need to heavy themselves, make themselves more dense to be able to manifest in this reality. And that is for us perceived as something that's very, very heavy. But the matter of the fact is that it's actually similar like the black hole technology. You think you are having some, or a neutron star, which is what fuels their crafts. They are not using fusion from the sun as we're seeing science do it today. They're using from neutron stars. And that's because that allows for that ability to both be high vibrant with enormous amount of energy and at the same time be enormously dense, similar to black holes, same dynamic. The more energy you put into a smaller unit, the heavier it becomes, as it creates a kind of a vacuum or a continuum around itself for where it can operate. And that's some of the sciences that we are to discover as we begin to work with things. Of course, there's a lot of things I'm saying here that is not to the spot on, because I'm not a physician and I'm not, a physicist, sorry about that, not a physician either, but not a physicist. I'm not educated in all of these fancy languages. I'm getting this as visual information, and I'm trying to the best of my abilities to explain it here, but just to put that one in here. And I will then continue my walk. There is much more to be said here, but that's a little bit for those of you who are interested in beginning to work with reality from a different point of view. These are some of the ideas that we are to begin to work with. Thank you.